Presented by Silicon Slopes Commons. My name is Clint Betts. What a week. An incredible week. Although maybe that's not the right word. An insane week, fascinating week, crazy week. Use whatever adjective you want. The world's not right. Here we are. Proving the world's not right. Here I am on a Sunday morning political show. Here you are watching it. Nothing makes sense anymore. Just strap in. Because with everything happening in the world, everything happening this past week, we've decided to talk about drugs, in particular marijuana and psychedelic mushrooms, on today's show. In fact, we're going to talk to three people who are actively involved in the scenes of what I just described. First is Christine Stenquist from Truce. Truce means Together for Responsible Use in Cannabis Education. She led the fight against Prop 2, actually for Prop 2, then against Prop 2, and now there's a battle between her and Connor Boyack from Libertas Institute. Speaking of Connor, he'll be on here as well. We're talking to Connor Boyack. He's the founder and president of Libertas Institute, also a major player within the fight of Prop 2. For those who don't remember, Prop 2 was to legalize medical marijuana. Connor and Christine from Truce started out as allies, and let me tell you, they're no longer allies, and we'll find out why today. And then finally, we're going to talk to Steve Urquhart, who's a former representative, state representative in the state house, Utah State House, also a former state senator in the Utah State Senate, and he's now the founder of a psychedelic mushroom church called the Divine Assembly. That's right, the Divine Assembly. So with everything going on in the world, so many different things happening in this state. We've got a presidential race. We've got a president of the United States in the hospital after contracting COVID-19. We've got a gubernatorial race with Spencer Cox and Chris Peterson, who held a debate. Just barely. Recently. This week. So many things have happened this week, I can't remember. But they held a debate. Everyone said it was good, and then they got mad at Spencer Cox on Twitter, and he's still going to win by 30, 40 points. Let's just be honest. Twitter's not real life. So here we are. There's so many different things happening in the state, in the country, in the world. Again, our president is in the hospital after contracting COVID-19. Our president is in the hospital after contracting COVID-19. He also debated. There's a crazy debate. We talked about it on the State of the Union podcast. I do that podcast with Liz Converse, who kind of runs Silicon Slopes Commons. I'm not sure why I'm here. She runs it. But check it out. Check Liz out. We record that thing every Wednesday. It's put out every Wednesday. We also release the full interviews from the show you're watching. Not you're about to watch, you are watching. From the show you're watching currently, we record the full interviews, and we put them out on the State of the Union podcast. Not State of the Union, State of Utah podcast presented by Silicon Slopes Commons. So, today, everything happening in the world, we're going to talk about drugs, in particular, marijuana and psychedelic mushrooms. We're going to start with Christine Stenquist from Truce. Christine, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, of course, I think the best place to start is to tell us about yourself and what you do as an advocate.
Well, I'm Christine Stenquist. I am a brain tumor patient. I live in Davis County, and back in '96, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I was working in a local hospital. I had a sharp pain shoot across my face and went down. About a month or so later, I had brain surgery that was unsuccessful. I still have 60% of my tumor left, but it left a lot of damage. They hit a blood vessel. I hemorrhaged, I stroked and slipped into a coma and awoke 4 days later. I had, like I said, I had stroke, so I had some speech problems. I had some swallowing issues. I had left-sided paralysis or weakness from stroking. There was a lot of complications and issues after brain surgery, which led to me not being able to go back to the workforce. And I was bedridden and housebound for about 16 years, was on disability, state assistance, just existing. And it was just a cycle of being on opiates and then coming back off of opiates a little bit so that I had a little wiggle room when I had pain cycles. And I found that this was not the best route for me to go, and I was seeking other alternatives. And that led me to cannabis. And a little long story behind that, but the result was that I decided that cannabis was an actual therapy that was beneficial for me, and wanted to do something to progress the movement here in Utah. So I started a Facebook page. I started collecting patients and advocates from all over the place. I was in a lot of different patient groups because I have multiple diagnoses. And I started asking patients and people within those groups if they were interested in cannabis or if they heard about medical marijuana and if they would be receptive to joining up with me as I kind of led the charge here in Utah on safe access.
Well, first, let me ask you this. How's your health now?
I'm doing really well right now. And I'm stable. I had a little bout for about the past year and a half. There was a little bit of struggle, but at the beginning of this year, I started to have a change and they improved. Things have improved.
So, Prop 2, as you know, I assume you were actively involved in Prop 2.
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of history about Prop 2. At the time when I started to want to advocate for cannabis, I was still using my cane. I caned my way up to Capitol Hill and attended my first session in 2013. And so I made sure that I got acquainted with the epilepsy moms, tried to express there is more science behind cannabis than just CBD, and shared my story. I came across and met Representative Gage Frower and Senator Urquhart, Steve Urquhart, and they politely told me that this was a first step in getting CBD passed, and whole plant access was not going to be a viable solution for Utah. They didn't feel like that was somewhere Utahns would feel comfortable with going. And I didn't take no for an answer. I walked into the room with the Sutherland Institute, the UMA, and Eagle Forum. And I am unfamiliar with politics. I'm just a mom from Kaysville. So I wasn't sure who these individuals were. I just shared my truth. I just shared my story. And some of them were taken back, but also very concerned about this issue coming up. So Connor and I decided we needed to do a ballot initiative. I have pulled together a lot of patients. I was very close and am very close to Doug Rice, who is the president of the Epilepsy Association of Utah. That was the group that was behind the first CBD cannabis bill, not only here in our state, but across the country. It was the first CBD bill we've ever seen. I partnered up with him, bringing his patients into our Truce group, and then also the veterans. I reached out to Drew Howells, who runs the Utah Medical Cannabis for Veterans group, and asked him if his people would be interested in joining together and pushing this issue forward. So we had a patients coalition pulled together. We tagged on our policy guy, our policy teammate, which was Connor and Libertas Institute, and we created Utah Patients Coalition, which is the campaign that ran Prop 2. Being behind Prop 2, watching people cross party lines, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, all parties. People found an issue that they could both get behind. Everybody could get behind. I guess what I say in the public and what I tell people is cancer doesn't care what label you wear. Sickness and disease comes to us all, and suffering is the human condition. So it made sense that we were having such a strong pull of support from all sides.
So Prop 2 passed, as you know. Nobody needs to tell you that. But for those listening and watching, Prop 2 passed. It allowed the state to create a system for medical marijuana. Mm-hmm. And then something really interesting happened, although I guess, this is the system we all operate under, and obviously the legislature has this right. But immediately after Prop 2 passed, they made changes to that law. And what were those changes, and why did your group decide to file a lawsuit?
I felt compelled to file a lawsuit. There was a lot of overreach from a particular well, I'll just be very honest. There was a lot of overreach from the LDS Church, from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They did not want Prop 2 to be in effect, and they had tried everything they could to sabotage that effort. And it was very upsetting to me to see such a prominent faith be so egregious in their politicking, and to the point that it was absolutely harming patients, and they were condoning and promoting an illegal bill that just didn't make sense to me. So I did hire Rocky Anderson. I felt like he was the pit bull we kind of needed to let the public know that we were serious about getting satisfaction. Several months later, we started a letter writing campaign and notified all the county commissioners, all the DAs, the county DAs, that this law was putting their state funding from the federal government for their health departments at risk, and encouraged them to push back. Luckily, Troy Rollins, who is in my county, who's my county DA, took a stand, and he said that Davis County absolutely would not participate in this program because it was not legal for them to participate. During an interview, I called on Sim Gill to also do the same thing, and he did. A couple days later, he made an announcement that Salt Lake County would not be participating in the state's program, which then triggered inevitably for us to have a special session. So this is special session number 2 to fix the replace and repeal law, because we couldn't move forward on dispensing cannabis through the health departments.
You mentioned Connor Boyack and Libertas Institute, and I remember when all of this was going on, and when the compromise was announced and all that type of stuff, that Connor got and Libertas Institute got actually quite a bit of blowback for their role in that. What was your thought on the way Libertas and Connor, the blowback that they received, and I mean, I assume you guys are still aligned?
We are not allies. No, we are absolutely not. The blowback, this is a little backdoor to the story that maybe many people don't know about. But in June of 2018, I sat down with the LDS Church, with Marty Stevens. I brought Doug Rice with me to that meeting.
And just for those, Marty Stevens is the church's lobbyist, is that correct?
He is the church's lobbyist, and he was the former Speaker of the House. So when I sat down with Marty, he wanted to know how we could stop the ballot initiative. And at that point, it already qualified. It was on the ballot. There was no stopping it. And that's what I informed him. There's no stopping it. The reason why I was approaching him was the law was flawed. It was flawed from the beginning. It's something that Connor had created with MPP, and we had disagreed with several aspects of the law, but he was insistent that it needed to be worded this way so that it could get passed, and also so that more people would be responsive to what we were trying to do.
Just real quick, again, I don't mean just for those watching and listening. NPP, can you explain who they are?
I'm sorry, I should be better about those acronyms. MPP is Marijuana Policy Project. Perfect. They are a lobbying group that is a national organization that goes into each state trying to pass ballot initiatives. So when you see a state like ours develop a groundswell, which my group helped create, the Patients Coalition was the epilepsy, the veterans, and then Truce captures a lot of different patients, all kinds of patients we were created a groundswell. MPP came in and tried to help us pass a ballot initiative. I was not real keen on that group, and I'm still not very keen on that group. I have a very strong opinion about big cannabis, and that's what we're seeing across the country is a lot of big groups that are making a lot of money off of patient suffering. I've sat with patients throughout the state. I've sat with dying patients. I have taken cannabis to strangers to teach them about this. I have a very different experience with this movement and with the patients as a whole and the public than Connor does. It is just a bit more intimate and a bit more emotional.
And Prop 2 passed, right? Absolutely. And it passed quite easily, even with the campaigns against it. I mean, what was the final total? How was it like?
We had 53%. So 53% is good. That's thousands and thousands.
It's
of
not like
votes.
overwhelming, but that's a
No.
majority.
I think the patients were used as part of their agenda. I still don't like the way the whole thing washed out.
So, but do you think the culture has changed around marijuana usage and medical
Absolutely.
marijuana as an effective treatment over the past decade? I mean, just the fact that it passed, even with the church's pretty clear opposition in the state of Utah, kind of points to a cultural change. Would you say?
I would definitely say that. I think the LDS Church had to struggle with it because this is where headquarters are. They didn't speak up and have problems in other states. And I'll just remind your audience, we have 47 states now that have some form of cannabis legislation.
You mentioned Representative Steve Urquhart, or Senator Steve Urquhart, who is no longer in the legislature. And I'm sure you've seen he started a psychedelic mushroom church. When he's seeing like ketamine, or I don't even know if I'm saying that, ketamine clinics for depression and things like that. What's next? I mean, is there, could you start a church around this? Isn't that a fascinating idea?
It is. I'm very close to Steve and his wife, Sarah, and I'm helping with this project because I have had my own personal experience with psychedelics, especially this year. I myself went to a ketamine clinic dealing with depression and pain, and it was transformative. From that, I ventured into other psychedelics. I have used hallucinogenic mushrooms. It's been a very healing process. There's a lot of information and studies out on psilocybin and FDA-approved studies that are in progress right now to help with PTSD, with depression, with a lot of traumas that people have experienced. So I'm very supportive of other therapies being used.
So what's next for the medical marijuana, or just the general cannabis movement here in the state of Utah?
We've got a ways to go. The biggest problem that we're seeing right now is it's just absolutely too costly. You're paying almost $500 for an ounce, and you can go to other states and get an ounce for $98. So we have a long ways to go to get it being more affordable. So I would like us to continue supporting better laws that make it more accessible. And I would like us to see some of that revenue go other places and not just into the pockets of a select few, because that's what it's doing right now. And it's leaving patients really not terribly better off. It's just only the rich can get involved.
Well, Christine, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you on again because I don't think this issue is going away anytime soon.
It's not.
Appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us though today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Fascinating interview with Christine. Again, that was Christine Stenquist from Truce. Don't forget, Truce means Together for Responsible Use and Cannabis Education. You want to learn more about them, go to their website. I don't know what it is, but you can type it in Google and you'll find it. Christine's a fascinating person, obviously very passionate about this issue. We'll have her back on to talk about it. For now, though, we're going to talk to Connor Boyack, the founder and president of Libertas Institute, who was also involved in the Prop 2 fight, to get his perspective. Connor, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we talked to Christine Stenquist from Truce. Do you know Christine?
I know Christine well.
So she says she was working with Libertas on Prop 2, and initially everything started out fine, and maybe now it's no longer fine. What's your take on how Prop 2 went and your relationship with Truce and Christine?
Oh, wow. Loaded question. All right.
Good morning, Connor.
Yeah, good morning. Let's unpack inside baseball and drama. So, okay, I'll start with Prop 2. So Prop 2 is a long time coming, right? We worked up at the Capitol for a couple years with Senator Mark Madsen trying to get a broad medical cannabis program passed, and the legislature just wasn't having it. We'd have minimal progress and then defeat and then more defeat. And so we ultimately decided to do a ballot initiative.
Man, I gotta say, I was somewhat involved. We were reporting a little bit on it through the Beehive, if you remember. You were, completely involved, entrenched in this, working nonstop on this. I gotta say, I was seeing the response and kind of the vitriol, I guess is a good word, that you received once this compromise was announced. Have you ever been through anything like Prop 2?
No, and I hope it never happens again. We had, threats against my children. We had to call the cops. I had people, attacking my character all kinds of ways, insinuating that the LDS Church had bribed me with $300,000, which is an oddly specific number to make an allegation about. Claiming I was throwing patients under the bus. People with whom I had great relationships for years, pivoting just because we were talking to the enemy, and suddenly starting to attack me and lying about me, knowingly lying. It was tough. I'll be honest. It was very tough. I have fairly thick skin. I think it was tougher on my wife, for sure. But it was a testament to me of how people of goodwill need to find ways to have civil dialogue, even when they passionately disagree. And some people can't handle that. Some people just want to fight and don't know when the fight is over, don't know when it's better to talk and have diplomacy. And I don't know if that's an issue with maturity or knowledge or experience or what have you, but it was something else. I'll to not have to say it in too many other colorful ways or more colorful ways. It was definitely something else.
Well, I don't know if you noticed, we're recording this right before or right after a presidential debate. And I'll tell you, civil dialogue doesn't seem to be a part of our politics currently, Connor. So I think we can all hope for it, but I don't think we're getting it anytime soon. I don't think the example's being set anywhere.
I'm extremely optimistic because, look, we're opening an entirely new industry. We're bootstrapping this thing, and you're going to have to work out those kinks. And so give it a year or two or three, the industry will mature, we'll have more competition, the prices will come down, but on the policy side, things are already, doing really well. And we're working very collaboratively with the legislature to solve real problems and make sure patients get what they need, which is what we wanted to do all along.
How come so few licenses were given for companies to grow? And it seems like there's been allegations of even some corruption around, or self-dealing. I have no idea around who got those licenses.
Yeah, for someone who doesn't get a license, there's always going to be allegations that those who did had some kind of inside track. And I don't have any personal connection to that myself to have knowledge, but I think it's not surprising that those accusations would be thrown around from people who didn't win. Why we limited it? Well, as a libertarian free market kind of guy, I would love that there's no restrictions at all. So maybe one day we'll get there. However, when you're dealing with very strong opposition who doesn't want this at all, and when you do have a very real issue of kind of diversion to the black market, right, in other states where you just have tons grown for the medical market, but then these suppliers need to find a way to sell their supply, but the medical market is oversaturated with cannabis. Well, you're going to go to the back door and go, sell it illegally. And so then law enforcement, of course, has these concerns. And so what we came up with was a restriction where there would be a limited number of licensees, but they would be able to grow a substantial amount sufficient for the medical market with provisions in the law to increase that yield per licensee and the number of licenses over time as the market matures. So initially there's kind of the limit, but there's a built-in mechanism to allow that to grow, both in the number of licensees and the amount each licensee can grow as the market grows, so that the supply of cannabis kind of tracks the size of the patient population, rather than having all these guys get in on the ground floor, growing as much as they can to beat everyone else, but then having a ton of product that they need to divert somewhere, and then have our opposition see like, oh, I told you so, they were going to divert it. Like, we didn't want any of that to blow back against the program and cause long-term problems. So we're trying to just kind of launch in the right way. Over time, I think a lot of these issues will work themselves out even more.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's like politics is the reason why there's like
There's a lot more to it.
there's licenses because of politics. It doesn't make a lot of market sense.
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, period, other than it's a compromise is what I'm hearing you say.
In a nutshell, yes, with one qualifier. Remembering that this is still federally illegal. You've got a lot of people with fear about what will happen if, right, if people start using this. And so we're just having to wade through that muck, which is why I think as we kind of get through that and people see that the sky isn't falling and things are okay, we can continue to loosen the program and get more towards a free market.
I'd say federally illegal for now, right? And but one of the problems was because it was federally illegal and is federally illegal. The initial compromise was going to have the health department sell medical cannabis. Is that correct? And then I believe that got changed.
They were going to sell in addition to the private market. There were kind of two channels, and they were like going to be 1/6 of the market. So there were going to be several licensees and then the government. And that was part of the negotiation. We knew that would ultimately fail. It failed quicker than we anticipated. And then we got a lot more licensees out of that for the private market.
Mm. So there's also this national group, and correct me if I'm wrong in saying their name. Is it the Marijuana Policy Project?
Yep, that's right.
What was when we had Christine on? She kind of tied their involvement to you and Libertas. Did you bring them in?
Yeah. So these guys have done a lot of ballot initiatives in other states. We've never done a ballot initiative. Not only have they done ballot initiatives, they've done it specifically for cannabis and medical cannabis. So we had discussions early on with them for strategic input and figuring out what to do, talking to funders across the country and saying, how can we raise money? This is going to be an expensive thing to do. And so, we definitely brought them on board to help with legal input on the policy. What aren't we seeing? We've got our bill that we drafted during the legislative sessions with Madsen. We took that bill and we're going to turn it into Prop 2, but we wanted to make sure that we had in that proposal for Prop 2 everything that we needed. And so they provided a lot of wisdom.
Is it appropriate, in your view, for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to get involved in politics at all?
I'll tell you this, as a faithful member of the church, I had so many conversations after they got involved in Prop 2 of people who had lost their faith, who had questioned their beliefs, specifically as a result of that action. They felt that their answer to your question was no, the church should not be involved in this, should not be telling me how to vote. And that prompted for a lot of these people kind of a reconsideration of everything they believed. And that was very challenging for a lot of these people, close friends, family. And I get it. I understand their perspective. Now, there's a lot of people out there when the church got involved who said they shouldn't be involved. They should have no voice. We should tax them. They have no right. To which I say, they're a 501c3 private organization, just like Libertas Institute. If we have a right to an opinion and to engage and kind of push ourselves into the negotiating table, anyone else has that right. I'm a big free speech advocate. The church has a right to do what they do. That doesn't mean they have to be taxed. We're not taxed. We're a tax-exempt organization. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there. They have the right to engage.
Well, thanks for coming on and, giving your perspective. Sorry to make you relive some of the Prop 2, craziness, and hopefully you don't have PTSD from this conversation. Finally, my last question for you is just more general. What is Libertas working on currently? And you've got a session coming up. You've got a gubernatorial race. I don't think you guys really get involved in races. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you've obviously got the session coming up in January. What's your goals? What's your focus?
So Libertas has now been around for about, I think, 8 going on 9 years. We've got a staff of about a dozen, and we work on a wide range of policy issues. So for the next legislative session, we're working on a big privacy proposal because we see the government continue to acquire technology that undermines our privacy, surveillance.
Like Banjo, for
like
example.
Banjo here in Utah is one example. Facial recognition technology, DNA. They can now, this is amazing. There's technology where someone can take your DNA, even just a fingerprint where you leave behind some skin cells, And with your DNA, they can create what a computer model of what your face looks like that is eerily accurate. I mean, we're getting into some very dystopian type of uses of these technologies. So we want to put boundaries around when the government can acquire these technologies. We're going to have some education proposals because there's a lot of angst right now from families wanting to figure out alternatives to the current environment. So whether that's pods, homeschooling, micro schooling, private schooling, charters, or whatever, there needs to be more flexibility, we think. And so we're working on that. We're working on some local government property rights stuff as well, and a bunch of criminal justice stuff. Police reform has been a big topic. And so we're going to be kind of tip of the spear in working on several police reform and criminal justice proposals to make sure that there's transparency, accountability, and uphold the good apples within law enforcement while making sure that the bad apples are weeded out and held accountable, which we don't really quite have. So you're going to see a lot of stuff. I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to meet in person still and not have to do remote, because they've done remote sessions throughout the summer for their interim and special sessions. It just does not work. It really, really does not work in terms of engaging with elected officials and having discussions. And so fingers crossed we'll be able to all be on the Hill, even if we're having to wear masks and, give elbow bumps. And I figure if the schools can meet, then why can't we at the Capitol? So we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that. We have a big agenda for January, and anyone who wants to follow what we're doing, you can find Libertas Institute on all the social channels or at libertasutah.org.
Okay, Connor, thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you on again as things progress.
Thanks, Clint.
Appreciate it. That was Connor Boyack, the founder and president of the Libertas Institute. You want to learn more about them? Type in Libertas Institute in Google. I don't know anybody's website addresses. This is how we're doing it. Google them. Connor Boyack's involved in all sorts of things. I'm confident we'll have him back on the show. But I can tell you this, it's clear the impact that Prop 2 had on him, his organization, and really the way alliances and politics are structured in the state of Utah. It's fascinating to follow. I'm confident the whole idea around marijuana, its legalization, both medical and recreational, within the state of Utah and the United States, is not settled. That issue, not settled. But we're not going to settle it today, not on this show. I don't even know what this show is. So we're going to go to former state senator and former state representative Steve Urquhart. He was a former state senator or former representative in the state house, and he is now the founder of a psychedelic mushroom church called the Divine Assembly. Fascinating guy. Watch our conversation. Steve, I've done a lot of reading about you in the past 24, 48 hours. I find you endlessly fascinating.
Uh-huh.
I think what your career as a legislator, both in the House, you were a representative in the House, and you were a senator as well for 2 terms in the Utah State Legislature. Your career, was it 16 years you were a legislator?
Yeah, 8 in the House, 8 in the Senate.
So I want to start there because we have a lot to cover with you. And again, like, I'm endlessly fascinated by what you're doing and what you've kind of announced recently. This is a political show, though, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Again, we were talking off air. I'm wearing a tie, so maybe that makes it political. Maybe that just makes it weird for everyone. But I'd love to know what your experience was like in the legislature, in both the House and the Senate, and what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Even some of the tense conversations with constituents. I always just figured that was part of the price I had to pay to be in the arena. So I loved it. And in the House, I was majority whip and then rules chair. Went over to the Senate and was chair of higher education appropriations, which I loved. I'm a big believer in higher education. I think we did some okay work there. And then my last 3 years was primarily spent battling for LGBTQ rights. We passed non-discrimination legislation, providing protections for sexual orientation, gender identity in the workplace and housing. And I'm really proud of that. That was a great battle.
Well, what's fascinating by that is this whole time you're in the legislature, both again in the House and the Senate, you're a Republican. And particularly in the time frame we're talking about, what you just described is not entirely in line with that party's view at that time, or did you have a different experience? I mean, what had you go outside of your party's, I guess, dogma, for lack of a better word, at that time, and fight for LGBTQ rights?
Yeah, people they would say you're so different than when you came in, and I'd say thank you. I don't think we should be the same person forever. LGBTQ rights primarily. That's where I just saw the issue differently, and I think better. I think I humanized the issue and just realized that the Republican Party was in a bad place on that, and largely still is in a bad place.
And you were a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You went on a mission to Brazil. You represented folks from St. George in southern Utah.
A lot of conservative bona fides in there.
Yeah, I mean, everything I'm saying is like, everyone would just kind of, that's what the legislature is made of here in the state of Utah. And then you started to gain, quite a reputation as a legislature for kind of being your own person, and not even allowing, something like conservative or liberal or Republican or Democrat to define who you are. And you've recently, and this is the main thing I want to talk about because I'm blown away by it, and I have a million questions about it. You've recently announced that you're launching a church based around mushrooms.
Yeah, I really do. I mean, I was in organized religion for decades, and I started having these experiences, which I think were much more profound and spiritual than anything I had in organized religion. And I think a lot of people have that experience with psychedelics, but don't go the extra step and call it religion. It just so happens that my sincerely held religious belief is that if I take psilocybin mushrooms, I can commune directly with the divine and get guidance in my life. And if that's not religion, then there's no such thing as religion.
So what led you to start a church around this, though, right? Like, because you could just take mushrooms or these psychedelics, right? And just have that experience for yourself.
Right.
What made you decide to start an organized religion? I mean, you filed for, organized religion status, I guess, or a nonprofit religion status here in the state of Utah. Right. What led you to do that?
A couple things. Community. That's a big part of what religion is building community. But also there's a safety aspect. The things we do in secret, the things we do in darkness, they lack protection. And there are some potential dangers with psychedelics. And you take me and my wife, our experience in Amsterdam, we just happened into a really good guide. I mean, that was blind luck, right? We could have happened into a really bad guide. And so part of this is if we have religious protections for what I really think are religious acts, then we can come out of the shadows rather than the first guide you go to is the only one you happen to know about. We can have a number of guides in the community, and word will get out, reputation. Some will be good, some should be avoided.
But what is a guide? What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's undisputed that mushrooms and other psychedelic experiences can have positive effects on humans. You see a lot of medicalization going on. We're about to have FDA approval for psilocybin mushrooms to treat chronic depression. This is coming out of great research at Johns Hopkins. And the way they administer, it's in a very controlled setting. And so there's a lot of safety in that. Well, the way people often experience psilocybin mushrooms is at a concert, out in nature. And some of those things can be beautiful, but if it's your first time, second time, it can be really scary. And so a guide is someone who helps make sure that the person is safe. The reason these things work to heal the soul, I can say, the reason they help us progress is because they put us in these open, vulnerable states. And so we can process things. We can look at things in our life. Well, those vulnerable states also can lead to abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. They can lead to trauma if we have a bad experience and can't process it. And so a guide is someone who helps make sure we have a good experience. Then on the other end of that, I'm really a big believer in people who've worked really hard to get these licenses. They've studied a lot. And so you have a lot of therapists out there who part of a psychedelic experience often should be a licensed professional or someone with a lot of training, a lot of experience to help us work through. These doors have been opened. Well, what does that mean? How can those experiences improve our lives?
So the way it'll be governed is different than maybe some folks, particularly in Utah, may be used to, which is you're not calling yourself like a prophet.
Yeah, not at all. I'm a lawyer.
Some sort of leader of this movement. You said you're a lawyer?
I'm a lawyer. Heaven help you if I'm your religious guide.
That's incredible, a lawyer.
So I'll tell you, back to the organization, one thing, you look at most religions and they are hierarchical, top-down dogma. And the only people who receive real revelation would be the founder and maybe some early acolytes. Then everyone else, they have to conform to that, right? If they see something different, then that's blasphemy, that's heresy. And so I love the idea that you and I are very different people, right? I mean, we're different from everyone else walking the planet. So why shouldn't your experience with the divine be something meaningful to you that incorporates everything you are, what you have in life? In my experience would be something different. We're just going to approach the divine in different ways and get different lessons. So when I've seen the divine, I have. And to me, it's in the form of my wife and my kids. I mean, I see them as the absolute gods that they are. And that has meaning to me, to know that I live and walk the earth with gods. And that's where the name Divine Assembly comes with. It's out of Psalms. It says that God met with the assembly of the gods, the divine assembly of gods, and counseled them basically to be better.
That's fascinating. Well, I wish you the best of luck, Steve, everything you're doing. Again, what do you want to give the website for the church again so people can learn more?
thedivineassembly.org. And there we have FAQs. We have some good information. We're still ginning up and want to put a lot more safety information on there for one thing.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Best of luck, Steve.
Thank you.
See ya.
Take care.
This has been State of Utah, presented by Silicon Slopes Commons. I have been and will continue to be Clint Betts. Thank you for tuning in. We want you to think of this as your show. If you want guests, you want us to cover hot topics, if you want us to do anything, basically, we'll do it. Email us at stateofutah@siliconslopes.com, and we'll cover it. Today we covered drugs. With everything happening in the world, we covered drugs, and that's all because of you. I don't know what that says about you, those who watch us, but we talked about marijuana and psychedelic mushrooms because you asked us to. You sent us an email at stateofutah@siliconslopes.com, and here we are. We covered drugs this week. This week in politics, we covered drugs. A lot going on in the world, in the state, in your city, in your house. So thanks for tuning in. This is State of Utah, presented by Silicon Slopes Commons, and I'm Clint Betts.